Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Omaha-born, Los Angeles-based guitarist and teacher Tim Kobza. He opened up about his sophomore album, the 2021 CD Montecito Heights. This musician is writing and recording music with attitude, movement, and authenticity, inspired by an extensive career playing in jazz, funk, Latin, soul, R&B, and improvised music. His tale is one you should hear. Enjoy.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Joe. How are you, man?
Hey, good, man. What's going on?
Oh, just over here getting some work done in the studio this morning.
Cool.
Nothing crazy.
Yeah. I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for taking a minute out.
No problem. Thanks for calling.
Let me ask you about your sophomore album here as we get into it. Talk to me a little bit about the new release.
I feel pretty good about it. It's been done for a bit, so I was going to try to do a release earlier, but I kind of wanted to wait until things opened up a little more so that it didn't feel like, sort of a vanity project coming out during a pandemic. There's other things going on in the world that are more important. An album that got made during the pandemic when I had more time to get in the studio and actually finish all these songs and get some players on there. Because I teach full-time at USC as well as having a pretty active career out here as a guitarist. So it allowed me the time, but I didn't want to make it seem like it was going to be put out right during the heart. I wanted it to be a little more open. So I think the timing worked out okay, if that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. Well, and to elaborate a little bit on the pandemic, how now that we're emerging out of it, how did all of this kind of unfold for you as far as, creatively and otherwise?
It was great creatively because I had a bunch of stuff that I had started that I wanted to finish, and it was more of a project of exploration and seeing where it could take me recording in a virtual world. Instead of getting in a studio with players, it was more of an assembly type production where I was coming up with a lot of it here and then sending it off to players. As far as like a guy in Greece, a good friend of mine, Arlen Oscar, played keyboards on a track, so we collaborated virtually over Zoom, to try to get the track right. The drums, a lot of the drums came during the lockdown, so I was sending tracks off, getting him tracked. I did one session in a room in a big space, a masked environment, but in general, a lot of the tracks came together from assembling parts from all my players I wanted to use on the project, just sending them tracks, talking them through it, letting them, do their thing on it, and guiding them gently. But most of the people just nailed it. They're so good. They're so good. I just let them roam,
So, this is obviously a pretty self-reflective time for everybody. What did you learn about yourself over this time? What did you not realize that maybe you learned that's going to make you better as you reemerge?
That's a great question. I think that before everything shut down and slowed down, I was really operating at a very heavy clip. I live in Los Angeles. Like I said, I have a very active teaching studio. There's a lot of driving out here. I was maintaining my live performance gigs that I do regularly with a whole host of different type of situations out here. I value, keeping my chops up and staying active as a player. So between those two things, and then I also have a fairly active studio at my home where I track. I do a lot of recording sessions for a lot of other people. The last few years I've been producing some artists and involved in collaborations like that. So what I've learned, I think, is that it was nice to slow down and that I was too darn busy to really dive deep into the creative side. And this has been going on for a long time. And so to have a pause from that was really kind of nice. I know it wasn't a nice time for everybody. I was very fortunate. I could transition my teaching to Zoom, and I didn't have to engage in a lot of driving, and I was able to spend time every day kind of deep diving into some creative work that I wanted to do. And so that's probably the biggest thing. And it brought me a lot of joy. It was great having this project going. For one thing, it helped me to, like I said, realize some creative finishing points on some songs, but it also let me engage with a bunch of my musician friends on a different level. Instead of, being on a bandstand with them, we were still collaborating, but it was just, sort of online and on the phone.
So how did this music journey begin for you? Talk to me about kind of where you were born and raised and how it all started.
The music journey for me, I grew up in Omaha. So you're in Kansas City, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I consider Omaha a very musically diverse and rich kind of region of the country that might be a little off most people's radar, but I kind of grew up, playing in rock bands, and I've been in guitar. I grew up playing piano a little bit, but then I transitioned over to guitar, and I connected with that instrument, and I was pretty young when I realized that I wanted to get out of Omaha and go see what was out there. I was very interested in, who were the players on all my favorite records. I was really interested in jazz and, the Pat Metheny, Jeff Beck, Jimi Hendrix, the high-level guitarists, all the guitarists who played on all the Earth, Wind, and Fire records, all the Steely Dan records. I was really interested in Motown and soul music and, the Steve Croppers and the rhythm sections of the world. So I knew I wanted to surround myself with really high-end players.
Over the course of the global pandemic, we all figured and learned things about ourselves. Yeah. What is it that you learned that made you stronger as you're going to reemerge into regular life again?
Through that process, I realized just how busy and crazy I was during, the years leading up with my busy schedule, trying to be high level on many different fronts. As a teacher, I've been a professor at USC for years. That's pretty demanding. It was a very demanding year on a lot of fronts there. And I was gigging a lot, working around town, doing a few travel dates here and there, not too much of that anymore. Maintaining a pretty active studio, recording guitarist type thing. I have a lot of clients that I work for. And then I've been producing other artists and collaborating with other artists for, the last 10 or 15 years. So when the pandemic hit and I was able to slow down and not drive and, pare my work down to some Zoom lessons and classes, a few meetings, and then I was able to deep dive into my creative artist side of my life, which had been kind of neglected as a guitarist, as a sort of guitar forward type artist. I've done a lot of stuff with a lot of other people, but I really wanted to take the time to kind of finish some stuff I'd started, dive deep into some writing and collaborating with a bunch of my musician friends that I love working with on gigs. And, that's kind of what was the big takeaway. And it really gave me a new appreciation for what I learned and where I want to go from here as we start to open up again. I'd like to put more energy and more time into this side of my music career. And that really brought that out.
Right on. Let's kind of go back to your beginnings here a little bit. The seeds of becoming a musician and loving music are always pretty profound. What was the first live show, jazz or otherwise, that you saw that made you think, man, I'd love to do that?
Yeah, that's great. I had a really great mentor when I was in high school. His name's Doug Johnson. He took over the band program there my junior year of high school in Omaha, and he was kind of a jazz cat from Boulder, kind of hip, kind of young, and played trombone, and he kind of saw that I was heading in this direction of improvised music and, jazz studies, and sort of I was into all of the usual suspects of the time, the Pat Methenys, the Jeff Becks, the Jimi Hendrix, the Joe Pass, the Jim Halls, West Montgomery. So Doug took it upon himself to blow my mind by inviting me to a Weather Report concert that he had tickets to at the Orpheum Theater. And that was the first time I got to see Jocko and the band, and it literally blew my head away. It was like, what is this? This is amazing. And, you know, there was an element of rock starness in it and the highest musical level, you know, of interaction and improvisation. So that was incredible. That was probably the tipping point for me to go, hey, I want to pursue this. I'm going to go down this road and see how far I can go.
You know, Miles Davis had talked about how long it took for him to find his voice, and I think a lot of musicians, you know, it takes you a while to get to a point where you have your voice, and the thing with you is that you've had so many levels of different genres, from jazz, funk, Latin, soul, R&B, and improvised. How is it that you've been able to meld all of those different genres and interests and professional pursuits into what you would consider your voice?
That's a good question. I think, like all of us, you know, as a guitar player, I think you have the opportunity to find your voice in a really unique way with all of the sort of expressive devices. And I'm really drawn to players that have that signature sound. You know, name that player in like 4 notes. And so, I think more than anything, I value, you know, seeking out my sound. In terms of my composition, my writing, and in my playing, so that I sort of stay in my lane. You know, keeps me from getting too frustrated when I hear all of the great guitar players, like the technical players who are coming out right now, the Instagram guitarists, you know, these players, these young kids that are just killing it, my students included. I mean, if we try to compare ourselves to the students coming up today and go, man, where was I when I was 18? You know, like, I think I was still in a sandbox somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Musically speaking, these guys are so evolved. So I think it's really valuable to draw inspiration from these young players, but yet realize that, hey, I've been working for years to find my own voice, and I'm going to get behind that and run it, you know, run with it and be me. And I think that's been a very valuable lesson. I try to instill that in my students as well.
So you've had the chance to be around a lot of veterans and big shots over the years playing music. What did you learn from them that you in turn have taught students and younger players around you?
That's a great question too. There's a drummer, John Molo. Him and I started a band called Motorico. And that was a really informative period for me in terms of getting on big stages and playing, you know, forms, but yet with a lot of improvisation involved in them. So he schooled me on a lot of things since he's been on the road for years. You know, he's played on stages he was originally in Bruce Hornsby and the Range back in the days, like played hundreds of shows with Phil Lesh. He's kind of embedded in the jam band world pretty heavily. He's kind of an icon. And he's a mentor as well. He's not afraid to take younger players and, you know, people that need some education under his wing and kind of show you the ropes, you know. So Molo was a big influence on me, just learning how to work in a non-conventional rhythm section in an interactive unit instead of a subservient, you know, role as a guitarist, you know, like you're locking in the rhythm section for the singer. This is more of a group improvisational, conceptual, everybody listening and seeing where it goes kind of thing. And he taught me a lot about stage deportment and sort of learning how to take things in the right direction in those kind of environments. So he was one of the biggest influencers for me.
So every day you wake up, you get the chance to, you know, create music, be a musician. What is it that you like the best about being a professional musician?
That is another great question, Joe. Being a musician has allowed me a lot of freedom in terms of I don't have the 8 to 5 or 8 to 4 type regiment in my life. Like every day, literally, like you said, you wake up and it's kind of a new adventure. And, I'll never have guitar totally sorted out. So there's always that as a goal and a puzzle to be solved. So that is one of the benefits of being a musician, is that, first of all, you'll never quite master your craft or your instrument. So there's constantly things you want to know about and learn about and unravel. And so you have time to do that. That's a really great thing. And it really keeps your mind heading in the right direction. So it's nice to have goals where I still want to improve as a guitarist all the time. I'm always the student. I think I get more out of my lessons with my students. I get at least as much as they get out of it. And then also, I really believe that the human spirit is a creative spirit, and to have the opportunity to sort of create music out of thin air is a real, it probably is what got me excited about a career in music the most. I think when I had a 4-track when I was a kid, and I was like layering sound over sound and creating sounds with pedals and, making music that locked up together with other players, I think that turned me on more than probably anything else. So I have that going on, plus the interpersonal, the social scene out here in LA with all the musicians is just such an incredible community, and I have my students and my colleagues at USC, and between all that, it's a very fulfilling and enriched sort of environment in which I get to live. I'm very thankful for that.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see any performer anytime, who would you see and who would you want to talk to after the show?
Oh, man. Could have used a little prep time on that one. There's so many of them, but I gotta think about that for a second. I really regret not seeing Miles Davis when I had the chance. I remember it was a moment. It was a fork in the road. I had a gig. Miles was playing. Some of my friends were going. I could have gone, but I was like, yeah, I'm working. That's kind of the story of my life. I missed a lot of things because I prioritized my opportunity to work as a musician. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never took that for granted. And so I prioritized the opportunity to do that more sometimes than, in retrospect, I should have. It would have been nice to see Miles. I'm going to go off the edge a little bit and say that I never saw Wes Montgomery live, of course, only on videos, but Wes, to me, would be a guy that I would love to get inside his head in a one-on-one conversation, because Wes was not a trained, reader. I don't think he could read a note of music, but what he was able to do to take the guitar to the next level and his effortless mastery on his instrument is just, I would really be thinking I was talking to somebody from literally another planet. Wes is that kind of player. So I'm going to leave it at that. There's a lot of other people, but I'm going to leave it at that, and him and Hendrix, okay? So
yeah, I dig it.
Can you imagine sitting down? I love the way Jimmy talks. He's so articulate, like all of the Dick Cavett interviews, and every time I hear him speak, he has such a eloquent way of looking at life and he articulates it in such a brilliant way that I would probably say Jimi Hendrix as well. Of course, he was a little before my time. In fact, I'm left-handed, but I play guitar right-handed, and I figured if somebody would have told me about Hendrix at that, point when I was like 9 or 10, I might have played left-handed. I don't know. I didn't know it was possible. I thought you bought one off the shelf and you played it, and that's how it works.
Yeah,
I didn't know you could flip the guitar over, right?
Yeah, totally. Kind of like with baseball or something. Yeah, I actually went to his grave marker up in Seattle years ago, and I was talking to a musician that was on the West Coast, a veteran musician. I can't remember who it was, but I was talking about, what's happening, say, that wouldn't have happened like when you were growing up. And he was telling me a story about how he snuck in to a Coliseum to see Hendrix and got backstage. And that kind of thing used to be able to happen if you were crafty enough and
Right.
you could do the whole Cameron Crowe Almost Famous kind of thing and hoodwink somebody. It was easy, you know. I mean, we used to do that. We used to, you know, find a way to get into things. And now with the way security is and biometrics and cameras, it's like you're lucky to even be able to validate a legal ticket, you know.
Oh, I know.
So
it's crazy. I was, like, speaking of that, I was really fortunate when I was a kid. I've been into music for a very long time. I think I've been a professional player since I was, like, in terms of getting paid to play, I think it was probably started in, you know, freshman or sophomore year of high school. I was already doing dances, and I had a band, and we were already gigging, and, you know, I was playing fairs and all this stuff. But I was underage for a long time, playing in bands with older players in Omaha, and I was sneaking in. I had ways. And in those days, I mean, that was essential. I had to go to those bars and watch these bands that were just insane. I mean, even by today's standards, some of the bands I grew up watching in Omaha, Nebraska were so great. You know,
yeah.
It's a band culture. It was like times have changed a lot. I don't know if younger players are going to have the opportunity to log in those hours that those bands were able to, and me as well. I mean, when I moved out to LA, I was getting my master's at USC, and I was in a cover band playing 4 or 5 nights a week with a bunch of my friends. We had regular gigs, and I needed to work, and I also loved the music. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to a gig and start at 9 and get done at 1 and get home at 2 and get up and go to an 8 o'clock theory class. That's just how it's going to go. And anyway, the point is that it was great to be able to get into these places to see these players. There was a guy, I'm going to think of this in a second. I'll come back to it. There was a guy who, we're talking about that moment when I saw Jaco Pastorius, you know, come out and take a bass solo standing on top of his amp at a Weather Report concert. I was like, what is this? You know, there was another guy, and I'll think of his name in a second, that I used to sneak in and go see in Omaha, who really changed, you know, my trajectory. I'll tell you in a second.
So what I was going to ask you is, you know, the world starts waking up and things start kind of coming back, and you know, live music is coming back. What do you hope we all realize about the power of live music, both performer and the audience, when we do return in earnest?
Well, I think we all learned a lot, which is never take for granted what you have, because it can be taken away at the drop of a hat. You know, I think we might be emerging into a new era. It usually works like this, I think, in history, where you literally decimate an industry by taking its ability to survive away. So music never died, of course, during this thing. It's been cooking along. Everybody's finding a way to make it happen. But for the live shows, I think there's, and it's my hope that people really realize just how essential these concerts, shows, small bar gigs, like, it's part of the fabric of life that I don't think people, even though they substituted with, you know, a lot of Netflix and other activities, I really think we're going to have a resurgence and a new golden era of live shows and an appreciation for the act of being in a room with a bunch of people and being a part of something like a live music show. So that's my hope. I think the thing has to rebuild itself. It's pretty crazy how many clubs closed out here, you know, like the sort of heartbeat of the Los Angeles scene, and I've been part of it for 25 years, building it, is these clubs where, you know, you can go see a 200, a 50-seater, a 1,000-seater. You can see everybody, and that's where it's all happening, and half of those places are gone, at least. So I think it's going to be a matter of how the rebuild looks. And it's going to happen, though. You know, I really believe in it. it's an organism that has to survive, and it's like going to find a way. You know what I mean?
I agree, dude. Yeah. So everyone has a perception, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, fans, students, but ultimately you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are? Yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah, you could do that.
That is the burning question, right?
Yeah, or you could even get dark and at Goodfellas tone. Who do you think you are? You know.
Exactly. Oh, speaking of which, man, I was able to play 2 holes of golf with Joe Pesci the other day.
Oh, wow.
At Country Club, and he just joined us. He was rolling around by himself. Joins our threesome. Play a couple holes. He gives my buddy some golf tips, and then he drives off to the next open hole.
Wow.
I was like, I'm not going to fanboy up on Joe. You know, I've seen him over there before, but I had a chance to actually, you know, talk to him, and I was like, I'm just going to be casual. It's cool.
That's it. Like, yeah.
Who do I think I am? Well, that is a great question. I value, these days, I think I value my role as a mentor as much as I do anything. That's why it's been hard for me to coax up the energy to, you know, sort of embrace the artist side of my career, because that takes a lot of, for me, it's a little uncomfortable being all about me. And so it's a slippery slope of like, hey, I have to have a presence. I have something to say. But yet I find more fulfilling activities in sort of collaborating and mentoring and teaching, working with the young set, you know, the up-and-comers, the next generation. So it's been hard, but again, you know, I'm on equal footing in terms of how much I prioritize that. I got into this sort of from an artist side of things. I'm glad to have had the chance to kind of go down the road, and I'm using this also as a sort of point of reference for my students that I help in, you know, production and then releasing and artistry and branding. And I mean, it's been very informative. So it kind of ties into that. But who do I think I am? That's good. I hope I'm somebody that people feel like, you know, I'm a good friend to, and also authentic in my, you know, love of music and my playing of it. You know, I'm a white guy playing the music of Black America, really. You know, I love blues. I love jazz. I love funk. All the things we talked about. I love Latin music. And, you know, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. Did I study this music thoroughly? Yes, I did. I think it's important for people to realize that this comes from a genuine place, having these kind of influences. And so my take on it is more of a tribute to the great music that came before that I love. So those are a couple things.
Beautiful. I like it, man. Tim, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz to open up about the new material, your life and music, and the future ahead, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Hey, can I go back to one thing real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Billy, the person that his name somehow left my mind is a very important influence on me when I was a kid, because I used to sneak into bars to watch this guy named Billy Rogers play. And Billy was from Omaha, and he moved out to the West Coast, and he played with the Jazz Crusaders. And I've never seen anybody in person, you know, to that point who could just channel, like, all the jazz masters and just close his eyes and play the most amazing stuff on guitar. And I feel like he was probably the guy who I was chasing in terms of connection with your instrument and connection with music and that whole thing of effortless mastery. Like, Billy was just incredible. And unfortunately, he had a very troubled life. You know, some of the times I saw him, he was pretty messed up and basically incoherent, but he could still play the shit on guitar. And Dave Stryker, who's another Omaha guy, he's a friend of mine, did like an album of a bunch of Billy's recordings that he'd made with like Jamie Aebersold tapes, and he replaced the tape with live players, and it was this Billy blowing on the 4-track, and he made this amazing record. But anyway, I wanted to throw that out there as a source of inspiration when I was a kid, and the value of having a good fake ID.
Yeah, right. That's beautiful. That's a great way. I think that's a triumphant way to wrap everything up, man. Tim, thanks again. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage and beyond, man.
Thanks for listening and tuning into another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Omaha, Los Angeles, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Tim for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.